I thought I could handle an open marriage until I saw her texts. Part A 1 to 4. I was standing in our kitchen at 11:30 on a Thursday night when my entire world collapsed. Not because of a car accident, not because of a diagnosis, not because of anything you typically imagine when you think about life-changing moments. No, my world collapsed because of a text message that wasn't meant for me. Megan's phone was sitting on the marble countertop, face up, charging next to the coffee maker. She was in the shower, and I was making chamomile tea because I couldn't sleep. Again. I hadn't been sleeping well for weeks, but I kept telling myself it was work stress, or the Texas heat, or too much caffeine. Anything but the truth. The phone buzzed once, then twice, then 3 times in rapid succession, the way it does when someone is really eager to talk to you. I glanced over, not really thinking anything of it. But then I saw the name on the lock screen. Drew. With a red heart emoji next to it. My stomach dropped before my brain could even process why. The preview of the messages glowed in the dim kitchen light. I can't stop thinking about what you said last night. You really get me in a way no one else does. When you talked about feeling invisible in your marriage, I felt that. I'm falling for you, Meg. I know we said we wouldn't, but I am. I stood there, frozen, the tea kettle screaming behind me. But I couldn't hear it. All I could hear was the blood rushing in my ears, the sound of my heart breaking in real time. I thought I was modern, evolved, open-minded. My wife and I had opened our marriage 6 months ago, and I genuinely believed I could handle it. I'd read the articles, listened to the podcasts, understood the theory. Ethical non-monogamy wasn't about sex. It was about freedom, trust, growth. We had rules, clear boundaries. We communicated. But nothing, and I mean nothing, prepares you for the moment you realize your wife is falling in love with someone else. The shower was still running. I could hear Megan humming something I didn't recognize. Something happy. Something light. I picked up her phone. I know I shouldn't have. I know that was a violation. We'd established privacy as one of our core principles. But my hands were shaking, and my chest felt like someone was standing on it. And before I could stop myself, I was reading. Scrolling. Drowning. The messages went back weeks, maybe months. Conversations about art, about philosophy, about feelings. Deep feelings. Feelings Megan used to share with me but hadn't in years. Drew asking about her day, about her childhood, about her dreams for the future. Megan responding with paragraphs. Actual paragraphs. She never texted me in paragraphs anymore. Our conversations were logistics. Did you pay the electric bill? What do you want for dinner? I'll be home late. There was one message from 3 days ago that made me physically nauseous. Megan had written it at 2 in the morning. I can't sleep. I keep thinking about what we talked about earlier. You asked me when I last felt truly seen by someone. I couldn't answer you then, but I can now. It's you. You see me. Tyler hasn't really looked at me in years. I don't think he even notices anymore. Drew's response was immediate, even at 2 a.m. I see you, Meg. I see how talented you are, how funny, how deep you think about things. I see the way you light up when you talk about your work. I see all of it. And I'm not going anywhere. I heard the water turn off. Panic shot through me. I placed the phone back exactly where it had been, my hands trembling so badly I almost dropped it. I turned off the screaming kettle, poured the water over the tea bag, tried to breathe, tried to act normal. Tried to pretend I hadn't just discovered that my wife of 7 years was building an entire emotional universe with another man. Megan walked into the kitchen wearing my old college t-shirt and sleep shorts, her wet hair dripping onto her shoulders. She was glowing. Actually glowing. I hadn't seen her look that radiant in months. Maybe years. Hey, she said, smiling at me. That smile used to be mine. Making tea? Yeah, I managed to say. My voice sounded strange even to my own ears. Want some? She shook her head, walked over to grab her phone. Her fingers moved quickly across the screen, typing something. Smiling again, that little private smile that used to appear when I'd send her flirty messages during her workday. Now it was for someone else. "I'm exhausted," she said, still looking at her phone. "I think I'm just going to crash." She kissed my cheek. It felt like a formality. A thing you do because you're supposed to, not because you mean it. She walked toward our bedroom, and I stood there in the kitchen holding a mug of tea I'd never drink, wondering how the hell I'd gotten here. If you've ever felt invisible in your own relationship, you know this pain. You know what it's like to stand 3 feet away from someone you love and feel like you're screaming into a void. Drop a comment if you've been through something like this, because right now I feel completely alone. Let me back up. Let me tell you how we got here, because it didn't start with Drew. It didn't even start with the open marriage. It started way before that, in the slow, quiet way that most marriages fall apart. With silence, with routine, with two people who stopped choosing each other. Megan and I met 9 years ago in Austin. I was working at a tech startup, spending 70 hours a week coding and convincing myself I was building something meaningful. She was a freelance graphic designer, the kind of person who could walk into a room and make everyone feel immediately comfortable. We met at a mutual friend's barbecue. She was wearing a yellow sundress and laughing at something I couldn't hear, and I remember thinking, I need to know her. Our first conversation lasted 4 hours. We talked about everything: music, politics, childhood trauma, our biggest fears, whether we believed in soulmates. She said she didn't. I said I did. She said, "Prove it." So I spent the next 2 years doing exactly that. Our wedding was small, 50 people at a ranch outside the city, string lights and wildflowers and her grandmother's playlist. When Megan walked down the aisle, I cried. Actually cried. She was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen, and I couldn't believe she'd chosen me. The first 3 years were good, really good. We traveled. We stayed up late talking about nothing and everything. We had sex on the kitchen counter and laughed about it afterward. We built a life. But then something shifted. I don't even know when exactly. Maybe it was when I got promoted and started working longer hours. Maybe it was when Megan's design business started struggling and she became quieter, more withdrawn. Maybe it was just life, the way it grinds you down slowly until you forget what you were fighting for in the first place. By year 5, we were roommates who occasionally had sex. By year 6, we were roommates who barely touched. We'd have dinner in front of the TV, scrolling through our phones, making comments about the show but never really talking. We'd go to bed at different times. We'd wake up, kiss each other on the cheek, and go about our separate days. I kept telling myself it was normal, that this is what marriage looks like after the honeymoon phase, that we were just busy, that we'd reconnect eventually, but eventually never came. Then, about 8 months ago, Megan suggested couples therapy. I resisted at first. I didn't think we needed it, but she insisted, and I could see something in her eyes, something desperate, something scared. So I agreed. Our therapist, Dr. Rahman, was this calm, insightful woman in her 50s who had a way of asking questions that made you realize you'd been lying to yourself. In our 3rd session, she asked us when we'd last had a meaningful conversation. We both sat there in silence for what felt like an hour. Finally, Megan said, "I don't remember." Dr. Rahman asked us what we wanted from the marriage. I said, "I want us to be happy again." Megan said, "I want to feel alive." Those 2 answers, I realize now, were completely different. We did the therapy homework. We had the scheduled date nights. We tried the communication exercises. And some of it helped. We were talking more, touching more. But there was still this distance, this gap. Like we were 2 people playing the role of a married couple but had forgotten how to actually be married. Then one night, after a session where we talked about desire and attraction and the ways long-term relationships can become stagnant, Megan said something that changed everything. We were driving home, stopped at a red light on South Congress. The neon lights from the bars were reflecting off the windshield. She said, "What if we tried opening things up?" I looked at her, confused. "What do you mean?" She kept her eyes on the road. "I mean, what if we gave each other permission to explore connections with other people? Not to replace us, but to supplement, to bring new energy into our lives." My first reaction was defensive. "You want to sleep with other people?" She sighed. "It's not about that, Tyler. It's about feeling desired again, feeling free, feeling like I'm more than just your wife, your responsibility. I'm a person, a whole person, and I feel like I've been shrinking myself to fit into this box we've built." I didn't know what to say. The light turned green and she drove. We didn't talk about it again that night, but I couldn't stop thinking about it. I did what any confused millennial does. I researched. I went down the rabbit hole of ethical non-monogamy, polyamory, open relationships. I read articles on Psychology Today. I listened to podcasts where happy couples described how opening their relationship had actually strengthened their bond. I read forum posts, success stories, cautionary tales. And slowly, against every instinct I had, I started to think maybe Megan was right. Maybe monogamy was the problem. Maybe we needed this. Maybe I was just too traditional, too insecure, too stuck in an outdated model of love. Maybe being evolved meant being open. 3 weeks later, I told her I was willing to try. The relief on her face was immediate. She actually cried. She hugged me so tight I could barely breathe. She said, "Thank you for trusting me. Thank you for being brave." We spent the next 2 weeks establishing rules. We treated it like a project, which in hindsight was probably the first red flag. We sat at our dining room table with notebooks and wrote down our boundaries like we were drafting a business contract. Rule 1 was no emotional attachments. This was about physical exploration, not romantic connection. Rule 2, always use protection. Rule 3, don't bring anyone to our home. This space was sacred. Rule 4, we didn't have to share details unless we wanted to, but we had to be honest if asked directly. Rule 5, if either of us felt uncomfortable at any point, we'd stop immediately and reassess. And Rule 6, the most important one, we choose each other first. Always. We both signed the bottom of the list, like it meant something, like rules could protect us from feelings. I downloaded the apps, Tinder, Bumble, Field. I created a profile that said, "Ethically non-monogamous married, looking for casual connections." The matches came quickly, easier than I'd expected. I met Sarah first, a nurse who was also in an open marriage. We had coffee, talked about our situations, laughed about how weird it all felt. We slept together twice. It was fine, pleasant, but nothing that rocked my world. Then there was Jessica, a yoga instructor who talked a lot about tantric energy and had crystals on her nightstand. We hooked up a few times. Again, fine. I felt desired, which was nice. I felt like I was doing something adventurous, which fed my ego. But none of it felt meaningful. None of it felt like connection. It was just bodies and validation and distraction. Megan was seeing people too. She mentioned a guy named Alex early on, someone she'd met at a design networking event. They went out a few times. She came home smiling, lighter somehow. I felt a twinge of jealousy but pushed it down. This is what we agreed to, I told myself. This is growth. Then she mentioned Drew, just casually like it was nothing. I met someone interesting. His name's Drew. He's a photographer. We're grabbing drinks next week. I said okay. I didn't think much of it, but that was 2 months ago. And now, standing in our kitchen staring at those messages, I realized Drew had become so much more than just someone interesting. He'd become her person, the person she confided in, the person she felt seen by, the person who was slowly taking my place. I couldn't sleep that night. I lay in bed next to Megan, listening to her breathe, watching her sleep so peacefully, and felt like I was losing my mind. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those messages. You really get me. I'm falling for you. Tyler hasn't really looked at me in years. The next morning, I went through the motions, made coffee, kissed her goodbye, went to work, sat at my desk and stared at my computer screen without seeing anything. My coworker James asked if I was okay. I said I was fine. That word, fine, the biggest lie we tell. That weekend, Megan said she was going out. With Drew, I asked, trying to sound casual. She paused, then nodded. Yeah, just dinner and maybe a gallery opening. She was wearing the dress I'd bought her for her birthday 2 years ago. The dark green one that made her eyes look like emeralds. She'd never worn it for me. Not once. I watched her leave, and something inside me cracked a little more. I spent that night alone, drinking bourbon and wondering what they were talking about, what she was telling him. If she was laughing at his jokes the way she used to laugh at mine, if he was touching her the way I used to, if she was falling deeper. She came home at 1 a.m. I was still awake, pretending to read on the couch. She looked happy, flushed, alive. Hey, she said softly. How was your night? Fine, I lied. How was yours? It was good. Really good. She sat down next to me, and for a second I thought maybe she'd open up. Maybe she'd tell me the truth, but she just kissed my forehead and said, I'm gonna shower and head to bed. And that's when I realized something that made my blood run cold. She was choosing him. Maybe not completely, maybe not consciously, but she was choosing him. Tell me in the comments what you would do in my place. Would you confront her? Would you wait? Would you walk away? Because I didn't know. I had no idea. All I knew was that I'd opened a door I couldn't close, and on the other side was a reality I wasn't ready to face. I thought I could handle an open marriage, until I saw her texts, part A 2 to 4. The next few weeks were psychological torture. I became a person I didn't recognize, someone obsessive, someone paranoid, someone who checked his wife's phone every chance he got. I told myself I'd only do it once more, just to confirm what I'd seen, just to make sure I wasn't overreacting. But once turned into twice turned into every time she left her phone unattended. Every time she was in the shower, every time she ran to the store, every time she fell asleep before me, I was there, unlocking her phone, reading messages that were destroying me from the inside out. The conversations between Megan and Drew had a rhythm to them, a pattern of intimacy that made it clear this wasn't casual. They texted every day, sometimes every hour. Good morning messages. Good night messages. Photos of things that reminded them of each other. A street mural, a sunset, a line from a book. He'd send her poetry, actual poetry, and she'd respond with voice messages, her voice soft and vulnerable in a way I hadn't heard directed at me in years. One night I read a message from Drew that said, I want to take you to Big Sur, just you and me, a weekend away from everything. We could watch the ocean and talk about all the things we never have time to say in stolen hours. Megan's response came 2 hours later. I was at work, probably in a meeting, completely unaware that my wife was planning a getaway with another man. I want that too. God, I want that so much. But I don't know if I can. Tyler would ask questions, and I'm not ready to hurt him like that. Yet. That word. Yet. It sat in my stomach like poison. I wanted to confront her right then, to throw the phone across the room, to scream, to demand answers. But I didn't. Because I was terrified of what those answers would be. Instead, I started watching her differently, studying her, looking for signs. She was happier than I'd seen her in years. She sang in the shower. She smiled at nothing. She had this energy, this lightness, like someone had lifted a weight off her shoulders. And the cruelest part? I was glad she was happy. Even though it was killing me, even though I knew I wasn't the source of that happiness, some part of me was relieved that she wasn't miserable anymore. Because she had been miserable. We both had been. We'd just been too coward to admit it. My own dating life had completely stalled. I'd stopped responding to messages on the apps, stopped making plans. The few times women reached out, I made excuses. I wasn't interested anymore. How could I be? Every time I even thought about being with someone else, all I could think about was Megan with Drew. Megan laughing with Drew. Megan sharing her soul with Drew. One afternoon, my brother Matt called me. He lived in Houston, and we didn't talk often. But when we did, it was real. No bullshit. He was one of the few people who knew about our open marriage, though I downplayed it significantly when I'd told him. "How's the whole open thing going?" he asked, his tone already skeptical. Matt had never hidden his disapproval. "Fine," I lied. He was quiet for a moment. "Tyler, man, I gotta be honest with you. I think you're making a huge mistake." I felt my defenses go up immediately. "You don't understand the situation, don't I? You're letting another man sleep with your wife. How is that not insane?" "It's not like that," I said, though even I didn't believe my own words anymore. "It's about trust. Freedom. Not being possessive." Matt laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Freedom? Bro, you sound like you're trying to convince yourself. What happens when she falls in love with one of these guys?" The question hit me like a punch to the gut. "That won't happen," I said. "We have rules." "Rules," Matt repeated. "Right, because feelings follow rules. Look, I love you, and I'm not trying to be a dick. But from where I'm sitting, it looks like you're destroying your marriage because you're too afraid to fight for it." We hung up shortly after. His words echoed in my head for days. Too afraid to fight for it. Was that what I was doing? Had I been so terrified of confronting our problems that I just opened the door and let someone else walk in? I tried to reconnect with Megan. I really did. I suggested a weekend trip to Fredericksburg, just the two of us. Wine tasting, bed and breakfast, the whole romantic thing. She said she appreciated the thought but needed space to process some things. Space. That word had become her favorite lately. I cooked her favorite meal, chicken piccata with roasted vegetables. She ate it while scrolling through her phone, barely looking up. "Thanks, this is good," she said absently. I asked her about her day, about the design project she'd been working on. She gave me short answers. Distracted. Her mind was somewhere else. With someone else. I even tried initiating sex one night. We hadn't been intimate in almost 3 weeks, which was unusual even for us. I kissed her neck the way I used to. Ran my hands down her sides. She tensed. "Tyler, I'm tired," she said softly. "Rain check?" I rolled over, stared at the ceiling in the dark, and felt more alone than I'd ever felt in my life. My wife was right next to me, and I was completely alone. If you're still here listening to my story, please hit that like button. It helps more people find these stories, and right now, I need to know I'm not the only person who's ever felt this kind of pain. The breaking point came 3 weeks after I'd first seen those messages. It was a Saturday. Megan said she was meeting Drew at some art exhibit downtown and would be gone most of the day. I said okay, told her to have fun, watched her leave wearing that green dress again. And then I did something I'm not proud of. I followed her. I don't know what I was thinking. Maybe I wanted proof. Maybe I wanted to see them together. Maybe I just wanted to torture myself. I parked a block away from the gallery and waited. 20 minutes later, I saw them. Drew was tall, probably 6'2", with dark hair and the kind of effortlessly cool style that made me feel instantly inadequate. Vintage leather jacket, perfectly worn jeans, expensive sneakers. He looked like he belonged in a magazine. And the way he looked at Megan. God, the way he looked at her. Like she was the only person in the world. She walked up to him, and he immediately pulled her into a hug. Not a casual hug, a real one. The kind where you hold on because you don't want to let go. His hand went to the back of her head, cradling it. Her arms wrapped around his waist. They stayed like that for what felt like forever. When they finally pulled apart, he kept one arm around her shoulders. She leaned into him naturally, comfortably, like they'd been doing this for years. They walked into the gallery together, and I sat in my car feeling physically sick. That should have been me. That easy affection, that natural chemistry, that look of pure adoration. That used to be me. I drove home, poured myself a bourbon even though it was barely noon, sat on our couch and stared at our wedding photo on the wall. Two people who had no idea what was coming. Two people who thought love was enough. Two people who were so stupidly naive. Megan came home around 6. She was glowing again, radiant. She found me still on the couch, now 3 bourbons deep. "Hey," she said, her smile fading when she saw my face. "Are you okay?" I looked at her for a long moment. This woman I'd loved for 9 years. This woman I'd married. This woman who was slipping away from me one text message at a time. "How's Drew?" I asked. My voice was flat, emotionless. She blinked, surprised. "He's good. The exhibit was amazing. Actually, there was this one piece that made me think of you." She started to describe it, but I cut her off. "Do you love him?" The question hung in the air like smoke. Megan froze. "What? Do you love Drew?" She opened her mouth, closed it, looked away. "Tyler, I don't think that's fair. Answer the question. It's complicated." That's not an answer. Her eyes filled with tears, but I couldn't feel sympathy. I was too angry, too hurt, too tired. "I have feelings for him," she said finally. "Yes, but that doesn't mean I don't love you." I laughed. It sounded bitter even to my own ears. "You have feelings for him? That's really nice, Meg. Really evolved of you." "You said you wanted this," she shot back, her own anger rising. "You agreed to this. An open marriage, freedom, no judgment." "I wanted us to fix our marriage," I said, standing up. "I wanted us to reconnect. Not for you to fall in love with someone else. We said no emotional attachments, remember? That was the one rule that actually mattered." "I didn't mean for it to happen," she said, and now she was crying. "I didn't plan this. It just developed." "He listens to me, Tyler. He asks me about my life. He makes me feel seen. And I don't?" I was shouting now. "I don't see you? When was the last time you really looked at me?" She shouted back. "When was the last time you asked me about my dreams, my fears, what I actually want out of life? We've been going through the motions for years, and you know it. This isn't about Drew. This is about us. About how we stopped being us a long time ago." Her words hit me like bullets, each one true, each one devastating. I opened my mouth to respond, but nothing came out, because she was right. The worst part of this whole nightmare wasn't that she'd fallen for Drew. It was that I couldn't even argue with her reasons why. We stood there in our living room, both crying now, both broken, and I realized something terrible. We'd already lost each other. The open marriage didn't destroy us. It just made it impossible to keep pretending. "I need to tell you something," I said quietly. She wiped her eyes. "What?" "I've been reading your messages. With Drew. I've been reading them for weeks." The color drained from her face. "You what?" "Her phone was unlocked one night and I saw a text from him. And then I kept looking. I know about Big Sir. I know he said he's falling for you. I know you told him I don't see you anymore. I know everything." Megan's expression shifted through several emotions. Shock, anger, betrayal, and finally something that looked almost like relief. "You invaded my privacy," she said, but her voice wasn't as angry as I expected. "You violated my trust." "I know. I violated your trust by reading your messages. You violated our marriage by falling in love with someone else. Seems like we're even." She sat down on the couch, put her head in her hands. "This is such a mess." We sat in silence for a long time. The sun was setting outside our window, casting orange light across the hardwood floors. Our home, the life we'd built, all of it crumbling. "Drew gave me an ultimatum," Megan said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "What?" "A few days ago. He said he can't keep doing this. He wants more. He wants me to choose. My heart stopped. And what did you say? I said I needed time, that I couldn't just blow up my marriage without thinking it through. But Tyler, she looked up at me, her eyes red and swollen. I don't know what I want anymore. I love you. I do. But I don't know if I'm in love with you, and I can't keep lying about it. There it was. The truth I'd been avoiding. The reality I'd been running from. My wife didn't know if she loved me anymore. And honestly, sitting there looking at this stranger wearing Megan's face, I wasn't sure I knew either. We'd become so good at hurting each other that we'd forgotten how to love each other. The open marriage was supposed to save us, but all it did was give us permission to stop trying. That night we slept in separate rooms for the first time in 7 years. I lay in the guest bedroom staring at the ceiling and wondered how we'd gotten here. How two people who'd promised forever had ended up so lost. And I realized something that made everything click into place. We'd thought opening the relationship would fix what was broken, but you can't fix a cracked foundation by building more rooms. You can only watch it collapse faster. Every choice we make creates a ripple. We'd chosen freedom without doing the work first, and now we were drowning in the consequences. I thought I could handle an open marriage, until I saw her texts, part 3 to 4. The next morning, Megan and I sat across from each other at our kitchen table like two diplomats negotiating a ceasefire. The air between us was heavy with everything we'd said the night before, everything we couldn't take back. She'd made coffee. I hadn't touched mine. It sat there getting cold while we tried to figure out how to untangle a mess that felt impossible to solve. We need to close the marriage, I said. Immediately. Megan nodded slowly. She looked exhausted, like she hadn't slept at all. I know. You need to end things with Drew. She flinched at his name, but she nodded again. Okay. Just like that? I asked. There was an edge to my voice I couldn't control. You're just going to walk away from the guy you're in love with because I'm asking you to? Tyler, don't. Don't what? Don't point out that you've been building a whole relationship with another man while our marriage fell apart? Her jaw tightened. I said I'll end it. What more do you want from me? I want to know if you actually want to save this marriage, or if you're just doing damage control. She stared at me for a long moment. I don't know how to answer that. At least she was honest. That was something. I do know that I don't want to lose you, she continued. I don't want to throw away 7 years, but I also can't lie and say I'm not going to miss him. Because I will. That hurt more than I expected. Worse than the messages. Worse than watching them hug outside the gallery. Hearing her admit out loud that she'd miss him made it real in a way nothing else had. Fine, I said. End it with Drew. We'll try therapy again. Real therapy this time. Not the kind where we go through the motions and pretend everything's fine. She agreed. That afternoon, while I was sitting on our back patio trying to process everything, I heard her on the phone in the bedroom. The walls in our house were thin enough that I could hear her crying. I couldn't make out all the words, but I heard enough. I'm sorry. I care about you so much. No, it's not about you. Tyler and I need to try to fix this. Please don't make this harder than it already is. There was a long silence. Then more crying. I know. I know you do. I feel the same way. But I can't. I just can't. When she came back outside 20 minutes later, her eyes were swollen and red. Her hands were shaking. It's done, she said quietly. I ended it. I should have felt relief. Victory, something. But all I felt was hollow, because even though she'd chosen me, I could see in her face that part of her was grieving. She'd lost something that mattered to her, and I'd made her give it up. We started intensive couples therapy the following week, 3 sessions a week with Dr. Rahman, who'd been our therapist before but now had her work cut out for her. The first session was brutal. Dr. Rahman didn't waste time with pleasantries. She looked at both of us and said, "Your marriage is in crisis, and before we can rebuild anything, We need to understand what actually broke. She asked Megan to explain when she'd started feeling disconnected. Megan talked for almost 30 minutes straight about how I'd gotten promoted 2 years ago and started working 60-hour weeks. About how I'd stopped asking about her art, her projects, her feelings. About how we'd stopped having real conversations and just existed in parallel. About how she'd felt invisible long before Drew came into the picture. I remember one night, Megan said, her voice cracking. I'd just landed this huge client, the biggest project of my career. I was so excited. I waited up for Tyler to get home so I could tell him. He walked in at 10:30, exhausted, and I started telling him about it. He was looking at his phone the entire time. After about 2 minutes, he said, "That's great, babe," and went to bed. I didn't even know if he'd heard anything I said. I sat there, stunned, because I didn't remember that night. I didn't remember any of the nights she was talking about. But I believed her. That was the worst part. I completely believed that I'd done exactly what she described. Dr. Rahman turned to me. "Tyler, how does it feel to hear that?" "Like I'm a terrible husband," I said. "Like I failed her." She nodded. "And when you realized Megan had feelings for Drew, what was your first emotion?" "Betrayal," I said immediately, but then I paused. "No, actually it was fear. Fear of losing her, fear that I'd already lost her, fear that someone else could give her what I couldn't." Dr. Rahman leaned forward. "Let me ask you both something. When you opened your marriage, what were you each hoping would happen?" "I thought it would make us excited about each other again," Megan said. "Like we'd go out into the world, have these experiences and come back to each other with new energy, new appreciation. I thought it would fix the distance between us." I looked at her. I thought the same thing. But also, if I'm being completely honest, I thought it would buy me time. Time for what? Time to avoid dealing with the real problems. If we were both distracted by other people, I wouldn't have to face the fact that we were losing each other. Dr. Rahman sat back. "So you both used the open marriage as an escape mechanism. Neither of you were actually addressing the core issues. You were just creating noise to drown out the silence." We both sat with that for a moment. She was right. Of course she was right. "Here's what I need you both to understand," Dr. Rahman continued. "Opening a relationship doesn't create problems. It reveals them, amplifies them. Everything that was broken in your marriage before is still broken now. The only difference is that now you can't ignore it anymore." Over the next few weeks, Megan and I did the work. Real work. We had conversations that lasted hours. Conversations where we cried, where we got angry, where we finally told each other the truth about how lonely we'd been. I told her about the night I'd come home and found her asleep on the couch, and how I'd stood there watching her and felt like I was looking at a stranger. She told me about the time she'd tried to initiate sex and I'd been too tired, and how rejected she'd felt. How that rejection had built up over months until she'd stopped trying altogether. We talked about Drew. I made myself listen to her describe what she'd felt with him. The attention, the intellectual connection, the way he'd made her feel interesting and valued. It killed me to hear it. But I listened. And she listened when I told her about seeing them together at the gallery. About how watching her lean into him had made me feel like I'd been punched in the chest. About how I'd sat in my car and realized I'd let this happen. That I'd been so checked out of our marriage that someone else had walked right in and taken my place. We started dating again. Actual dates. I took her to dinner at the Italian place where we'd had our first anniversary. We went to an outdoor concert and held hands. We stayed up late talking about the things we used to talk about. Our dreams. Our fears. What we wanted our lives to look like in 10 years. Some nights were good. Really good. We'd laugh about something stupid, and for a moment it felt like we were us again. The people we'd been 9 years ago. Young and in love and full of hope. But other nights were hard. So hard. There were times when Megan would get quiet and distant and I knew she was thinking about Drew. Times when I'd see her phone light up and feel my stomach drop, even though I knew she'd blocked his number. Times when we'd be intimate and I couldn't stop wondering if she was comparing me to him. One night, about 6 weeks into our reconstruction project, we were lying in bed after making love. It had been good, connected, almost like before. Megan was tracing patterns on my chest with her finger, something she used to do all the time. "Tyler," she said softly. "Yeah? Do you think we can actually get past this?" I was quiet for a moment. "I don't know. I want to. God, I want to. But I don't know if I can forget." She stopped tracing, looked up at me. "I see it in your eyes sometimes. The way you look at me. Like you're trying to figure out if I'm really here, or if part of me is still with him." I pulled her closer. "Are you? Am I what? Still with him? Part of you?" She took a long time to answer. "No, I ended it. I haven't talked to him. But do I still think about him sometimes? Yes. I'd be lying if I said I didn't." The honesty hurt. But it was better than lies. "I think about him too," I admitted. "I think about what you had with him, what you shared, and I wonder if we'll ever have that again, or if we're just going through the motions because we're too afraid to admit this might be over." Megan started crying. I felt her tears on my chest. "I don't want it to be over," she whispered. "I love you." I know she meant it. I did too. But I also knew that love wasn't always enough. Sometimes love is just the thing that makes it hurt more when you have to let go. We kept trying. We went to therapy. We had the conversations. We did all the right things. But there was a crack in our foundation that we couldn't seem to repair. Every time we took a step forward, something would pull us back. My brother Matt came to visit about 2 months after everything had blown up. We went to a bar in East Austin, sat on the patio drinking IPAs and watching the sunset. "So how's it going with you and Megan?" he asked. I'd been updating him throughout the process and he'd been surprisingly supportive. "Better," I said. "Some days. Other days, not so much." He took a drink. "Can I ask you something?" "Sure. Do you actually want to save the marriage? Or do you just not want to fail?" I stared at him. "What's the difference?" He leaned back in his chair. "Look, I know I gave you shit about the open marriage thing, and I still think it was a mistake. But that's not really the point anymore. The point is whether you and Megan actually make each other happy, whether you actually want the same things, or whether you're just holding on because you're scared of starting over." I don't know how to answer that. Matt shrugged. "Maybe that's your answer right there, bro. I thought about that conversation for days. Did I want to save my marriage because I loved Megan? Or because I was terrified of being alone? Because I didn't want to admit failure? Because starting over at 34 felt impossible?" The truth was, probably all of the above. 3 months after Megan had ended things with Drew, Dr. Rahman asked us a question that changed everything. We were in her office, sitting on opposite ends of the couch like we always did. There was always that space between us now. A physical representation of the emotional distance we couldn't quite bridge. "I want you both to close your eyes," Dr. Rahman said. We did. "Now I want you to imagine it's 5 years from now. You're still together. You've worked through everything. You're happy. Really, genuinely happy. Can you see it? I tried. I really tried. But when I pictured the future, all I could see was us still having these same conversations, still trying, still working, still exhausting ourselves trying to fix something that might just be broken." "Open your eyes," Dr. Rahman said gently. She looked at both of us. "Could you see it?" Megan and I looked at each other, really looked at each other, and I saw the same doubt in her eyes that I felt in my chest. "I don't know," Megan said, her voice barely audible. Dr. Rahman nodded slowly. "Let me ask you something else then. If you weren't married, if you met each other today as the people you are now, would you choose each other?" The question hung in the air like a death sentence, because we both knew the answer, and it was destroying us to admit it. I don't think so, I said finally. Megan's face crumpled, but she nodded. Me neither. Dr. Rahman leaned forward. That doesn't make you bad people. It doesn't mean you didn't love each other. It doesn't even mean you don't love each other now. But sometimes people grow in different directions. Sometimes what worked for who you were doesn't work for who you've become. And holding on to something that's run its natural course doesn't honor the love you shared. It just creates suffering. Megan was crying now. Full sobs. I want to argue with you. I want to say you're wrong. That we can make this work if we just try harder. But I'm so tired, Dr. Rahman. I'm so tired of trying. I am too, I said. And then I started crying too. Because I knew what was coming. I'd known for weeks, maybe months, maybe from the moment I'd seen those text messages. We'd already lost each other. We were just too afraid to say it out loud. I thought I could handle an open marriage. Until I saw her texts, Parte 4. The decision to separate didn't happen all at once. It wasn't dramatic or explosive. It was quiet, sad, the kind of ending that feels more like a long exhale than a final breath. We sat in Dr. Rahman's office for another hour that day, both of us crying, both of us holding each other's hands even as we acknowledged what we'd been avoiding for months. Our marriage was over. Not because we hated each other, not because of Drew, or the open marriage, or any single thing we could point to and say that's what broke us. It was over because we'd become two different people than the ones who'd gotten married 7 years ago. And those two people, the ones sitting in that office, didn't fit together anymore. Dr. Rahman helped us understand that this wasn't failure. It was recognition. Sometimes love means letting go. Sometimes the most courageous thing you can do is admit when something has run its course. I moved out 2 weeks later. We decided I'd take an apartment closer to downtown while Megan kept the house. It was easier that way. She had her studio there, her whole setup. And honestly, I needed a fresh start. Needed a space that didn't have memories soaked into every wall. The day I packed my things was surreal. I stood in our bedroom, our bed behind me, and loaded clothes into suitcase after suitcase. Megan helped even though she cried through most of it. We didn't talk much. There wasn't much left to say. When I was loading the last box into my car, Megan came outside. She was wearing one of my old t-shirts, the one from that concert we'd gone to on our second date. Her eyes were red and swollen. Tyler, she said. Yeah? I'm sorry. For all of it. I know, I said. Me too. She stepped forward and hugged me. Really hugged me. The kind of hug that says goodbye in a language words can't capture. I held her tight, breathing in the scent of her shampoo one last time, feeling her heartbeat against my chest. When we pulled apart, we were both crying again. Take care of yourself, she said. You too. I got in my car and drove away. I watched her in the rearview mirror, standing in the driveway of the house we'd bought together, getting smaller and smaller until I turned the corner and she disappeared. My new apartment was small, a one-bedroom in a modern building with floor-to-ceiling windows and exposed brick. It was the kind of place I would have loved when I was 25. Now it just felt empty. I spent the first week in a haze, going to work, coming home, sitting on my couch and staring at the wall. My coworkers noticed something was off, but I didn't tell anyone what had happened. How do you explain that your marriage ended not with a bang but with mutual exhaustion? That you'd tried everything and it still wasn't enough? James finally cornered me in the break room on a Friday afternoon. Dude, you look terrible. What's going on? Megan and I separated, I said. The words still felt foreign in my mouth. His face fell. Oh man, I'm so sorry. When? Couple weeks ago. Jesus. Are you okay? I thought about that. Was I okay? No. But I also wasn't not okay. I was just existing in this strange limbo between what was and what would be. I will be, I said. Eventually. That became my mantra. Eventually. Eventually, I'd stop reaching for my phone to text Megan about something funny that happened. Eventually, I'd stop setting the table for two. Eventually, I'd stop waking up in the middle of the night with my heart racing, thinking about Drew's messages. Eventually. I started seeing a therapist on my own. Not Dr. Rahman, but someone new. A guy named Marcus who specialized in divorce and relationship trauma. He had this way of asking questions that made you realize you'd been lying to yourself about pretty much everything. In one of our first sessions, he asked me, "What did you learn from this?" "That I'm not as evolved as I thought I was," I said. "That open marriages don't work." He shook his head. "That's not what I'm hearing. What I'm hearing is that you learned opening a relationship doesn't fix a broken foundation, that rules can't protect you from feelings, that sometimes we make choices out of fear rather than courage." I sat with that. He was right. The open marriage wasn't the problem. It was a symptom. Megan and I had stopped doing the work long before we opened anything. We'd stopped choosing each other, stopped showing up, stopped being curious about who the other person was becoming. And when you stop watering a plant, it doesn't matter how much sunlight you give it, it's going to die anyway. Marcus leaned forward. "Tyler, do you know what the real tragedy is here?" "What?" "The real tragedy is that you and Megan loved each other, genuinely loved each other. But you both forgot that love is a verb, not a feeling. It's something you do, not something you have. And somewhere along the way, you both stopped doing it." That hit me harder than anything else, because he was right. I'd loved Megan. I still loved her. But I'd stopped showing up for her, stopped asking the deep questions, stopped making her feel seen. And by the time Drew came along and did all those things, the damage was already done. Over the next few months, I did something I should have done years ago. I worked on myself. Actually worked on myself, not just talked about it. I started going to the gym again. Not to get ripped or impress anyone, but because moving my body helped quiet my mind. I picked up reading again. Books about philosophy, about relationships, about the nature of attachment and loss. I reconnected with friends I'd neglected during my marriage. Started saying yes to invitations instead of defaulting to staying home. I even went on a few dates. Nothing serious, just coffee or drinks with women I met through apps or friends. It felt strange at first. Wrong, almost. Like I was cheating, even though I wasn't married anymore. But slowly, it started to feel normal. And more importantly, I started to understand what I actually wanted in a partner, what I needed, what I wouldn't compromise on again. 4 months after I'd moved out, I ran into Megan at a coffee shop on South Congress. Pure coincidence. She was sitting by the window with her laptop working on something. She looked different. Her hair was shorter. She was wearing glasses I'd never seen before. She looked good, healthy. "Tyler," she said when she saw me. Her face registered surprise, but not discomfort. "Hey, can I sit?" She gestured to the chair across from her. "Please." We sat in awkward silence for a moment, both of us holding our coffee cups like shields. "How are you?" I asked. "I'm okay," she said. "Really okay, actually. I started seeing a new therapist, been working through a lot of stuff. That's good. How are you?" "Same. Therapy. Gym. Trying to figure out who I am outside of being married." She smiled sadly. "Yeah. That's been the hardest part for me too. I realized I built my entire identity around being your wife. And when that ended, I had to figure out who Megan actually was." We talked for almost an hour. Really talked, in a way we hadn't been able to when we were married. She told me about a new client she'd landed, a major branding project that was challenging her in all the right ways. I told her about a promotion I was up for at work, how I'd been putting in the hours but actually enjoying it this time because I had something to work toward. Eventually, I had to ask the question that had been on my mind since that night in the kitchen. "Did you ever hear from Drew?" Her face clouded slightly. "Yeah." He reached out a few times after I ended things, wanted to try again, wanted to see if maybe now that I was separated, we could give it a real shot. And I said no. Why? She took a sip of her coffee, considering her answer. Because I realized something. What I had with Drew wasn't real. It was intense and it felt meaningful, but it was built on fantasy. We never had to deal with bills or bad moods or boring Tuesdays. We only ever showed each other our best selves. And that's not sustainable. She looked at me. What Drew and I had was a symptom, just like our open marriage was. The real problem was that you and I had stopped being partners. And I needed to figure out why I let that happen before I could be with anyone else. I felt something release in my chest, something I'd been holding on to without realizing it. Thank you for telling me that. She nodded. I'm sorry, Tyler. For everything. For Drew. For not being honest about how I was feeling earlier. For letting it get to the point where we were so broken we couldn't fix it. I'm sorry, too. I should have fought for us sooner. Should have noticed you were disappearing. Should have asked the right questions instead of just assuming everything was fine. We sat with that for a moment. The apologies we probably should have given each other months ago. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if we'd done things differently? She asked. All the time. But I think we did the best we could with the tools we had at the time. We just didn't have the right tools. She smiled. Very therapeutic of you. I've been in therapy a lot. She laughed, and for a second, I saw the girl I'd fallen in love with 9 years ago. The one in the yellow sundress who'd made me believe in soulmates. Before we went our separate ways that day, Megan said something that stuck with me. I don't regret our marriage, Tyler, even with how it ended. You taught me so much about love and partnership and what I need to work on in myself. And I hope someday we can look back on this and be grateful for what we had instead of just sad about how it ended. Me too, I said, and I meant it. The divorce was finalized 6 months after we'd separated. We'd agreed on everything beforehand, split things fairly, kept it as painless as possible. The day the papers were final, I didn't feel the way I thought I would. I wasn't relieved or devastated or angry. I just felt quiet. Like a chapter had ended, and I was standing on the first page of a new one. Not quite sure what the story would be, but willing to find out. I'm writing this now, almost a year after that night, when I saw Drew's text messages on Megan's phone. A year after my world collapsed in our kitchen while she hummed happily in the shower. And I can finally see it clearly. The open marriage didn't destroy us. It just revealed what was already broken. It exposed the cracks in our foundation that we'd been papering over with routine and avoidance, and the comfortable lie that everything was fine. We thought freedom would fix us. We thought giving each other permission to explore would bring us closer. But you can't fix intimacy issues by seeking intimacy elsewhere. You can't solve communication problems by communicating with other people. You can't build a stronger foundation by constructing more rooms on a house that's already falling apart. What I learned, what really sank in through all the therapy and crying and late-night soul-searching, is that love requires presence. It requires showing up. It requires doing the hard, boring, unglamorous work of asking your partner how they're really doing and actually listening to the answer. It requires noticing when they're pulling away and having the courage to ask why instead of just letting them drift. Rules can't protect you from feelings. Agreements can't shield you from pain. And no amount of ethical non-monogamy or modern relationship structures can substitute for two people choosing each other every single day. Megan and I stopped choosing each other long before we opened our marriage. We stopped seeing each other, stopped being curious, stopped doing the work, and by the time we realized what we'd lost, someone else had already stepped into the space I'd left empty. That's on me as much as it's on her, maybe more. I don't blame Drew. He didn't destroy my marriage. He just walked through a door I'd left wide open, and I don't blame Megan for walking through it with him. She was starving for connection, for attention, for someone to see her, and I'd stopped providing any of that. Every choice creates a ripple. Every action has a consequence. We opened our marriage thinking we were being evolved, but really we were just avoiding the truth. And the truth came for us anyway, the way truth always does. Nothing changes until something inside us changes first. I spent so much time trying to change the circumstances, the rules, the structure of our relationship. But what needed to change was me. How I showed up, how I loved, how I communicated. The extremes I lived through taught me to seek balance. Not the balance of being in an open relationship while maintaining a marriage, but the balance of being fully present, of honoring both freedom and commitment. Of understanding that real intimacy requires vulnerability, and vulnerability requires trust, and trust requires consistency. I'm dating someone now. Her name is Sophie. She's a teacher, passionate about her work, funny in this quiet way that catches you off guard. We've been seeing each other for about 2 months. It's early, casual, but different than anything I experienced during the open marriage. Different because I'm different. I ask her questions, real questions. I listen to her answers. I notice when she's having a bad day. I show up. Not because I'm trying to avoid the mistakes I made with Megan, but because I genuinely want to know who Sophie is, what she thinks about, what makes her laugh, what scares her. And when she shares those things with me, I don't check my phone. I don't zone out, I'm present. Maybe it'll go somewhere, maybe it won't. But for the first time in years, I'm not afraid of either outcome, because I know now that a relationship isn't something you have. It's something you build, every day, with intention and presence and choice. Tell me in the comments, have you ever thought you could handle something only to discover the hard way that you weren't ready? What did it teach you about yourself, about love, about what you actually need in a relationship? And if this story resonated with you, if you've ever felt invisible in your own life or struggled with the gap between what you thought you wanted and what you actually needed, please hit that like button. Share this with someone who might need to hear it. Subscribe if you want more real, raw stories about love and loss and everything in between. Because here's what I want you to take away from my story. Opening your relationship isn't inherently good or bad. Some people make it work. Some people genuinely thrive in non-monogamous structures. But it's not a magic fix. It's not a shortcut around doing the hard work of intimacy and communication and showing up for your partner every single day. If you're thinking about opening your relationship, ask yourself this first. Are you running toward something or running away from something? Are you seeking to add to a strong foundation or trying to distract from a crumbling one? Because if it's the latter, I promise you it won't work. The cracks will only grow wider. The distance will only increase. And eventually you'll find yourself standing in your kitchen at 11:30 at night, reading text messages that break your heart, wondering how you let it get this far. Save yourself that pain. Do the work first. Have the hard conversations. Get curious about your partner again. Ask the questions you've been avoiding. Show up. Be present. Choose each other. And if after all that, you realize you're not right for each other anymore, that's okay too. That's not failure. That's honesty. That's courage. That's love in a different form. Megan and I didn't make it, but I don't consider our marriage a failure. It was 7 years of learning, of growing, of discovering who I am and what I need and what kind of partner I want to be. And now, standing on the other side of the wreckage, I can finally see the lesson. Love isn't about freedom or rules or what's evolved or modern. Love is about showing up, seeing the other person, choosing them, every single day, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. I thought I could handle an open marriage, but what I really needed to learn was how to handle intimacy. Real intimacy, the kind that requires vulnerability and presence and the courage to keep showing up even when it's uncomfortable. That's the work. That's always been the work. And it took losing everything to finally understand that. If you've made it this far, thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for witnessing my pain and my growth and my hard-earned lessons. I hope it helps you in some way. I hope it makes you think about your own relationships, your own choices, your own presence. And I hope it reminds you that even when things fall apart, even when love ends, even when you fail, there's still wisdom to be gained. There's still growth on the other side. There's still hope. What would you have done in my situation? Would you have fought harder? Let go sooner? Opened the marriage in the first place? Let me know in the comments. I read every single one, and your perspectives help me continue to process and heal. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. And remember, no matter where you are in your own journey, you're not alone.